Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Otaku Heaven coming at you with another anime episode review. Today I'll be reviewing Ajin episode 10. And if you're anything like me, there's one thing you can't argue against this anime, and that's whether or not the pacing is good, because so far the pacing has either kept you fully interested or at least partially interested, again, if you're anything like me. Now, this episode had extremely good pacing. We got to see a lot happen. We got to see at first, Oga was telling us a lot about, Ogra, sorry, was telling us a lot about the Ajin and how they act. For instance, the invisible black matter normally can only summon 1 to 2 IBMs at a time. The Ajins can only summon 1 to 2 IBMs at a time, basically, and they disappear after 5 to 10 minutes. And the way they communicate with these Ajins are through radio waves, which threw me off earlier because he said that the reason he didn't summon his Ajin in the assault to rescue Nagaike, Mr. Sato didn't, is because the radio waves are interrupted by the rain because it was raining that day. But if they're inside of a building and only have walls to go through, the radio wave should have been fine just to stay inside of the building. Once they got out, it would have been a bit of an issue, but probably not within the building, not off of radio waves. But that's what threw me off in that section. And on top of that, there was this cool thing called flood. When an Aijin dies and is basically going through resurrection at the peak of an emotional, um, let's see, what's it called? Uh, on an unstable emotional state, then a flood of IBMs come out. Not just one or two, multiples. It could be anywhere as much as 10. We haven't really been given a good number, but it's most likely somewhere around 5 because they can only summon 2 normally. Then it will probably be somewhere double that because it's often said that you can double your potential when you have a lot of focus and you really care about what's going on. So that's that's what I believe is going on there. But Nagaike is actually still showing that he's got some humanity left in him. Instead of making this kid that he just not save, just basically put into this container, you sit down there with nothing to do, bored, and just starve to death. He's actually bringing in food and magazines. Granted, they were really boring business magazines, if you find those boring like I do. But he gave him a little bit of something to do, along with, you know, the food, so he doesn't starve to death. So he is showing his humanity, and we got to see how he handles his agent, and he learned a lot about his agent. I mean, it really wasn't much, but that one thing is just that big. For instance, in order to control his agent, he basically has to say the opposite of what his agent wants to do. So if he wanted his agent to cut down this tree, he's got to say don't cut down that tree. Then guess what? His agent's going to do it. Now there is a theory that someone had posted in one of the comments, and I think it's really right, to be honest with you. Basically, Nagai K, the reason his IGN doesn't follow him, or his IBM doesn't follow him and do what he says, is because Nagai K isn't doing what he really wants to do, and the IGNs play very strongly off of your own emotions, I believe. So if he's not following his own emotions and his IBM is, he would obviously have to say the opposite of what he wants his IBM to do to get his IBM to do what he wants him to do. And that's why he's basically neglecting to say that. And then we got to see a little bit of Mr. Sato in this. He's still planning the invasion. He's getting everything set up. He's got this new van that they spent a lot of time painting and setting up to look like a legitimate company. And on top of that, he's also got this computer dude. He's been working on computers the whole time, so he's obviously set up some kind of intelligence. So they have a one really smart computer dude, at least a very good painter to have it set up like that. Um, well, maybe not very good because you can use painting tape and all and have the stripes perfectly lined up, but still, he's got some good people working with him. So he's basically declared his assault on this pharmaceutical company to show his superiority. Because if they tighten security and he still makes it through, then the people are going to start to get really worried because this guy's actually a legitimate threat now. But if he fails to go through, then this style I didn't think fails, but that's most likely not going to happen. Or otherwise, the story would die really quickly. So he's most likely going to go straight through with it. And the little lapdog sent in to replace Tozaki later on, he actually takes Tosaki's back, and we find out that he's working for the U.S. government. And if you look behind the U.S. government, basically the U.S. government official when they were talking to the lapdog that was reporting on Tosaki's work. He had an Ajin behind him, so I don't know if there's just another Ajin or he had an IBM behind him. I don't know if there's another Ajin back there or that dude is actually the Ajin, but he's really pissed off at Ogra for basically laying his hands on U.S. property, or either Tozaki for placing his hands on Ogra, which he considers U.S. property. One of the two, he's really pissed off about Ogra having that information and Tosaki bringing it out of him. And Tosaki has basically came up with all this information out of the blue. The scientists are like, no, it sounds like we're listening to Ogra. There's nothing to back this. You need to take this over there and get him fired right away. Which the lapdog kind of puts him in his place. Like, y'all haven't done anything. We actually have no reason for y'all to be here, basically. At least Tosaki's coming up with something. So until y'all can figure something out, we're going with Tosaki's plan. Because Tosaki obviously knows a little bit. And then we move on to Kay. Kay is scouting out this whole land mass that he basically has as his safe haven right now. Figuring out places that would be good for him to potentially hide things. How he could escape in the event that something actually comes. For instance, he noticed that the current wasn't very strong, so he could basically jump off there and die and get back up somewhere else. Or he couldn't count on the current to push him very far away if it was still really still, because he's probably going to check it every day to determine his best escape route each and every day. Unless these old guys get even more suspicious of him. He kind of nipped the suspicion in the bud a whole lot earlier than we had initially expected, or at least I initially expected. There's two people that came down on two separate days to, and found basically Nagai K just sniffing around. So they were very suspicious about whether or not he was actually the old lady's grandson or not. So he comes in there and tries to apologize to him. He says, "Before I didn't have any before my mother and my sister and my father got separated from me, I thought I could live in this world alone, but only after this being my very last place to go, I figured out I need people to live in this world." So he brought them alcohol, and they all had a good time. He basically showed that he was a very, very excellent actor, and he basically cleared a lot of the suspicion from everyone but the older, more heavier set guy. He didn't clear anything with him yet. That's the last guy he's got to work on in order to maintain his safe haven to be good for him for as long as he needs it to be. But moving along, we got to see Sato's actually ready to go now. He's got the plan all together, and that's where it left us off, where Sato's getting ready to go in on this dude. And one thing that I forgot to mention earlier was very, very important. When they were talking about the flood, the Shinya case was information that shouldn't have been had by anyone else, because Ogra was like, Ogra was really shocked about that, and he's the forefront of Ajin research right now. So that was very interesting that the Japanese had such intelligence on the Ajin at this point, and whether or not the U.S. had intelligence on that specific case is still up in the air. So Japan may actually be ahead of the U.S. in the Ajin research field right now, but the U.S. actually has a lot more information that either was stolen by Ogra or that was obtained by Ogra before the Japanese have obtained it already. So the Japanese are either ahead in that sense or behind in knowing everything that Ogra knows. The U.S. could potentially know all that right now, and later on, an international war could spark between the two based on the information known and how they use the Ajin. But I seriously doubt it, considering that if it's anything like the real world, the U.S. and Japan are actually allies, which begs the question, why are they not already sharing information? Maybe Japan fears that America would take them over, or America fears that Japan would take them over if they got a certain amount of Ajins that could take them on, because they can't really die. So that's pretty much it for this. I'm probably going to give it a 9 out of 10 because I really enjoyed it. Everything was good. We had good plot progression. We had good acting from Kay. Mr. Sato's kicking in. A lot of information on the Ajins from Ogura Sensei, and from Kay with his experiment with his Ajin to determine exactly what he had to do to make it follow his commands. But that's all for this, guys. 9 out of 10. Peace.